Gente, muito bom dia.
Good morning, everyone. It's a huge honor to be here today. I'd like to thank you immensely for this opportunity, sharing this table with these wonderful, dear people, all the companions in this fight, whom we share a fight. Claudia is my department colleague, my academic sister in life. Companion Edson, a reference to us, always a big companion, very present in all convocations of our research group. And Bispo, our amazing reference, also very generous with us all the time that we had the opportunity to meet, exchange. Sometimes he talked with our group, research group, with his phone from the woods. So it was amazing. It's amazing to be here with our friends from the people who share actions, who reaps actions and hopes. So talking about education and starting this roundtable here. So with my self-description, because this is being recorded, this will be available on the internet, especially to circulate this to other audience, also people who have visually impaired. I'm a white man. My hair is in a ponytail. I'm using a traditional Nicaraguan blouse. Is the land of my mother. I'm wearing jeans. And each one of us here that comment will also introduce themselves and make their self-description to record this so we can circulate this to the biggest audience possible. So for starters, and have a first question, a first is trigger an instigation. I think we have a challenge to think about education through a decolonial perspective, which is very challenging in a world in which we see an exercise of necropedagogy, of teaching people, of docilizing people before death, of fascism, of trying to make them live peacefully in front of the machine of genocide and that we have just won democratically in elections. And we just had the defeat of fascism, the fascists, and now we have to build another way of life. And before the challenge of this construction, the scenario we are living, I think the first question we have to start circulating here and going to initial presentation is how to build such an education, a decolonial education that is able to face necropolitics and build a world made of other worlds where that fits, that embraces many other worlds. So let's start to talk and then circulate our ideas. Good morning, and now I yield my floor to Claudia so she can speak, make her self-description, and go on. Thank you, Celso. Good morning. I'd like to start introducing myself, but before that, saying thank you very much to our colleagues, Professor Luisa, Professor Claudia, to the research group. I'm very thrilled in participating and know about the effort of this group that is consolidated with a different type of work in the sense of university. Congratulations to the professors for this whole result of being able to bring new senses. Our role in the university has to be this one of transforming the reality. So congratulations to this group that is consolidating. We see in the faces of the students that are supporting here, from changing the ones that are picking people up in the airport, the PhD that's here, the power of leadership, because we are also leaderships in this space, to bringing it and conveying a new message. Congratulations, professors. The university needs you, needs more people that are touched by you. I'm Claudia Miranda, a Black woman. I studied 16 years in public schools in Rio de Janeiro. I come from the social movement. I'm a next habitant of the Maré favelas complex. I've been a teacher of Marielle Franco, and she came from the community experience of youngster groups. So I had the pleasure, the experience of being together to those migrant families in the Maré complex and with this young girl from the Catholic Church. But that one in which the young group is expelled, we were expelled, and I'm very proud of that, of being expelled as a young girl in the Catholic Church, activist, when I was 17, in the basis of the Black movement in Rio de Janeiro. So I come from this reality, and I wanted to tell you about my pride of having been a professor in the public school. So this is a moment that makes me very proud. I have dear friends here, I'm making new friends. So this big family is celebrating for several reasons. I've been working under the perspective of living in the network. So it's stimulating affectionate process. I finished my PhD asking the leadership, how many minutes, Sas? Asking the leaderships of the Black moments in my PhD, how it was to be in the university, disputing university census. This was my thesis in 2006 at Wedge. I have interviewed many leaderships and activists that were being educated, people like Petronilha, Walter Silvério. What was meant be university professor disputing the university with this aim? You get out of the social movement, you have an agenda, and then after the PhD, asking their leaderships how is to dispute, displace the anti-racist fight and the diversity fight. So I went to the Afro-Colombian movement. I went to Puebla, Mexico, 2004. I started working with the leaderships of the African Colombian movement in Bogota and Medellin. And since 2004, I've been in this agenda. We have connections with the people from Ecuador. The indigenous movement took me last month to Ecuador to a very motivational event, the deliberation of the indigenous and Afro-descendant people. So with Afro-Colombians and this never-ending network that makes us understand that it's another perspective of existence, of understanding the reality. I think thinking education, anti-colonial, decolonial education, it can't be singular anymore. It has to be plural. We learn in our road with our peers, with collaborators that are up to negotiating with us in the Black movement and indigenous movement, that we have to work always under the dialogical perspective. And I understand that the university, the school, can no longer deal with a single educational perspective. So I think that, as it was said by Kihan there, at the Andean University in 2015, we have to work inside because we don't have where else to go. We don't have another world. I'll take a jet, a rocket. We don't have where else to go. And Quijano said, well, you have to go within and against, and how to work within and against. And this with these disputes that Aya is doing, we are inside the university, but we are going to do inside, but against. And I think these are important axes to grab. So the first thing to me is being inside, but also being against. I think we're here with our students. We came here with our students, Professor Helena, Professor Cynthia at UFRJ, Professor Helena at UERJ, Pia and Celso at UNIRIO, Elison, Claudia, Luisa. We're inside the institution, but we are against it. We do not agree with the violence that exists inside the university. We are here, but we are against it. So this is the first key.
É muito bom a gente levar cascudo quando a gente é adolescente.
So it's very important to be beaten up when we're in people we understand. As a youngest daughter, I was very beaten up by my siblings. So we have to learn to listen. I have listened to Quijano and I reflect, what is that he said? He said that with such strength So, and he goes on with the same conference that you can find on YouTube, that the greatest revolution, the decolonial revolution, was in Haiti. And he said they were African descendants against the colonizer. So he situates the Haitian revolution as the most important, the most decolonizing in our history period. So we are in and against. And another very important exercise that and I say it with a lot of joy, listening to our speaker, professor that we had yesterday at night. We had to make revolutions with what we have. That was my translation of what he pointed. How do we make a revolution with what we have? We have a history, a diasporic history, and we have to we have to sustain ourselves, to bring our strength from this diasporic experience. So what are our possibilities? Accumulation of the originary people, all knowledge of originary people beyond this territory called Brazil. We have a big family. The colonizer came and put a line, a frontier, but we are not this. We are a big family. So the originary people, they help us understand. Amazon helps us understand, think. We need to live in a network. We need to think about movement. And that's what we are doing when we come to participate and learn and unlearn and relearn about our university agenda here with our colleagues that have brought us here. So how do we get this experience that is from the territory and we feed from it? The African descendant diaspora, the experience from our originary people in Amazon, that's all the time communicating the Equatorian groups and the Colombian groups with Brazil. I'm in this itinerary in Latin America since 2004. And I've been learning this. We have to think in movement. This is another important key. Think in movement. What are we doing in the university with our most important listeners? We are trying to help them also to think about movement. And also another point that has to do with accumulation. How do we rescue this? Oh, we have to institute, as we learned with Professor Santiago Arboleda Quinones of the Andina Simón Bolívar University, we have to own our role as that of building new theoretical offering. I have this agenda as an apprentice. I will unlearn and relearn Arboleda. In 2017, we took him to a pasantía, me and Celso, and he repeated that a lot, that we have to build new theoretical constructions. We need, in some way, walk side by side with the social movements. We cannot let go of social movements in this space that is institution. And the story of new constructions, but it has to do with the Sankofa movement. And what is the Sankofa movement? It's the accumulation of our original populations, the accumulation of the Quilombo communities, the African neighborhood that became favelas. So what are the accumulations? I need a Sankofa movement. The Sankofa movement is looking back and understanding the whole trajectory. I remember in 2016, a person that works with us saying very coldly, the first impacts of the coup, the first attacks, the person said to us, a person that's much older than us. So we have to start all over again. And how do we start all over again? The Sankofa movement will understand the worst moments that we have gone through, look back, and to acknowledge the accumulation. We need to acknowledge the accumulation of the originary people, the Quilombola people. We need to make the Sankofa movement. We are able to find in these experiences lived by the Quilombolas, by the originary societies, the alternatives. We have developed many resistance technologies. Now we need the Sankofa movement so we don't get desperate. Those people who are interested in the Sankofa movement have many examples. Does anyone here know LASA, which is a very important meeting, a research meeting in Latin America? Does anyone know it? Claudia knows it. Lélia Gonzalez, a Black woman, a migrant, she used to participate at LASA when no one knew LASA. So in the 80s, Lélia was already connected with Latin America as an intellectual, thinking about movement, thinking. So when we find our most important listeners in the university, the so-called students, and sometimes they are our teachers, we have to understand, we have to recognize this. A lot of students teach us how to be teachers within the university. And sometimes they have a hard time facing the pain that the university promotes. We have to put this agenda forward, the Sankofa movement, as a possibility of strengthening. They were much more hostile environments than the ones we face nowadays. So let's look at the examples. Let's see what were the alternatives, the exits that were found by those people, those leaders, the intellectuals. The first time I read the Lélia's findings, Lélia at LASA, and well, she created the Unified Black Movement. When was it? What year? What environment? And we know what the social movements mean. The fight of women within the social movements. We know why the Black women's movements was created. So imagine the strength, the grit, the modus operandi by Lélia Gonzalez, a woman that was fundamental for the creation of the Unified Black Woman movement, and an intellectual with a management office at Pontifícia Catholic University at Rio de Janeiro. I've been an employee alongside Professor Helena Araújo, and we know that at that place, PUC at Rio de Janeiro, a lot of people considers that discussing multiculturalism, like is the case of Professor Vera Candô, is not research. No, Vera doesn't do research. So from between 2008 and 2017, there's hallway information. We have heard that kind of comment. Oh, but that thing that Professor Vera Candô does is not research. Interculturality, multiculturalism. That's between 2008 and 2017 in an institution where Lélia had a management office. So you can imagine how many Black teachers do you find at PUC at Rio de Janeiro nowadays in Lélia's area as a professor, as a manager. So in what moment Professor Lélia Gonzalez was a professor at PUC, he was a manager at PUC, he was a participant at LASA, was one of the idealizers of the Unified Black Movement. So the Sankofa movement helps me to go through a pandemic, helps me to go through the attacks of this coup that put us in the center of its objective, destroy science, destroy the university. So the Sankofa movement is a fundamental movement for us not to lose one another. We have an accumulation, we have a history of a lot of righteousness. We live in a moment, a very interesting moment of momentary happiness. And this is the result of fight, the result of this accumulation. And I really believe that we need the Sankofa movement. And I really believe that we have to grab this idea of making a proposition and many propositions. So I've been working with the idea of epistemological excavations. So who is in the university bringing novelties? It's the children of social movements that come to PhD, master's undergraduate programs. These are the best researchers, and period. The best researchers are coming from those people who are arriving at the university. That felt very threatened when I was a student at UERJ at the PhD. I was at UERJ. I hosted the students because I was at color policy program as coordination assistant, and the university said it was at risk because the students, they wouldn't have a good outcome, and UERJ held the results for a long time, but the academic result of the affirmative action students, why did they hold? When they released it, what did we find out? That the affirmative action students, they had the same results that the non-quota students. So we are inside and we are against it, and we see the result of what we have obtained, what we are able to defend. So it's a bit of that. We have to think from other types of education, a lot of education, other pedagogies, many pedagogies, and always side by side with the social movement. Thank you.
Enquanto passa a palavra aqui para o Edson.
Okay, well, they give the floor to Edson Bispo. I'd just like to reaffirm that the fight against this imposing of a pedagogy, the necropedagogy that teaches us to silence and annihilate and accept all of this as normal, we say no. And as Marielle, a fight companion, was mentioned, as someone who has taught us a lot and keeps teaching us a lot, she was a professor of life. Everything she left as a legacy of her fight is teach us to fight. And as said by Amilcar Cabral, we learn fights and fight learning. Marielle present.
Mete bronca, Bispo.
Okay, Bispo, it's your turn. When we talk about chatting and writing with mistakes, when we sing out of key and we dance out of bars, when we paint out of lines and we draw out of shape, it's not a mistake. It's because we're not colonized. Thank you. So I'm a Quilombo person. I live at the Caatinga in the inside of Piauí. I have dark skin. I have a black-white pattern t-shirt, long beard, also white, curly hair, like pichain, like spongy. I want to question the title of the round table, the Decolonial Education. Actually, I don't want to question. I want to add something. Creation against colonialists. I was an ox tamer since a child. How did I tame oxes? We had to confine them in their territory with a fence, or take them from the territory and take them to another territory that was already fenced. So I had to give them names. So the art of naming is the art of domaining. Everyone who raises dogs names them. Everyone who raises cats names them. So I was not raising. I was domesticizing. Everyone who's domesticizing, educating, colonizing, taming. It's all the same. It's all the same. So that done, what did I do? So I had to change their way of eating. I had to make them eat a single food but something that would addict the ox, to make him dependent, make them think that could only live out of that food that I offered. And so I put them to work. That's what education is. What is education? You get a child, you take from their habitat, which is their family home, take them to a confinement, which is school. You stop. You don't teach them what they need to live, and you teach what they don't need, but end up learning to serve and not serve themselves. The schools, the literary schools, schools that follow written language are the most efficient colonization instruments. When I was in the 4th year of elementary school, one of my masters asked, can you read a letter and write a letter? You know, the 4 operations, mathematical operations. Can you read a prescription of medicine? Can you make a table? Can you make a house? To leave the school. Because what you know already works. Because school and paper is just a means of communication. It's not a means of teaching. People live high school without knowing anything. And what do you call that? How do you understand a state that shows the automobile as a means of transportation and people leave high school without knowing how to drive? How people live high school without knowing how to cook? How people leave high school without knowing how to make clothes, shoes? What is that? So you're bragging as a university and, oh, we're doing this and that. It doesn't work for anything, just to take the creative power out of people, the affections. So I think that those who are discussing decoloniality are correct. But decoloniality is a mercantilization of practices. And that's what university works for, to mercantilize knowledge, to bring fashion words that are alienating. What is the trajectory of these decolonialistic people? Tell me your trajectory. Who was the great-grandfather of these decolonialistic people? I tell my grandchildren who was my great-grandparent, who my great-grandparents were. I say who my Joana was. I want everyone to have the courage to say who great-grandparents were. What were their contribution to the world, for the world to be like this? Okay, this I call creative power. But then what I want to say is, why am I not decolonial? I think there are a lot of people who are decolonial, and I don't disagree with this debate. But who has to be decolonial are those who were colonized. If you were colonized, okay, you can scream, fight to be decolonized. I was not colonized. So why do I have to change in Europe a referential if I have Palmares? If I have Canudos, if I have Caldeirão, if I have Curtume, where I live, if I have Calungas? Why the laziness of learning the other people's trajectories? Why to talk about in well living and not talk about the Quilombola living? In Quilombism, the reference that are here, why people want to erase our trajectories bringing mercantilized words? Since the beginning of the colonialism, there are Quilombos, and they will keep existing. So why am I going to decolonize if I was not colonized? I'll counter colonize. Does anyone think that it's inside? Whatever. Inside and out. I didn't invent that. This is in capoeira, a pé inside, a foot inside, a foot outside. This is in drum beating inside and outside, because it will end. It's up for the European. Okay. But why these people in the university doesn't accept that they accept a PhD thesis in which you say this is only true true because my grandmother said, no, you have to say that was Karl Marx, even if he was dead. But the guy is dead. How does he know about my life? He's a monster. So why don't they don't say that? These people don't have grandparents. The Christians, the Euro Christians don't have grandparents. God had a son called Jesus, okay, amazing. But Jesus had no children. So God didn't have grandchildren. He's not a grandparent. So why does this society puts grandparents in nursing homes and children in daycare, making references to their gods? We can say that you have a grandparents. You will confrontate God. You can only say that you have parents. And I'm putting this because these words are amazing. If life has a start, beginning, middle, and end. So seed is the beginning, the leaf is the middle, the flower is another beginning. So we cannot talk about different things talking about using the same word. We cannot talk about Quilombola, indigenous, colonialism, counter-colonialism, using the same word education. To colonialist people, yeah, okay, whatever, education. I even want to help educating them. And that's why I go into university, trying to help educate the colonialists. And talking to Boaventura Souza Santos, I told him, Boaventura, I think you're correct, but you're correct in the wrong place. Go back to Portugal and tell yours not to attack mine because mine have never attacked yours. So guys, it's just say this, we are living an amazing moment. These words vibrate in me, and I'm saying what I like to learn. If someone likes to learn, great. If they don't, my audience is myself. And why am I saying I'm living our best moments of our lives? Because when Dilma left, they asked me, Bispo, what do you think? Is it a coup or is it not? What did I say?
And so when they asked me, what am I going to do with the shit that Bolsonaro is saying? My dears, shit is fertilizer. Right? It is. Let us use this shit and let us fertilize our minds and speak of good things. That's how the world works. And, they're asking me now, Bispo, what do you think is going to be with Lula? Well, we need to give time. The question is not with Lula and how he's going to treat us, but how we are going to treat him. We're not a creature of the Lula government. The Lula administration is our creature. It's not about the ministries, but the agenda, the program, whatever the government is, our relationship is with the state. The government, the administration, they all pass by, but the state continues. And there's no good employer to change, when you have a train, is the track that matters and not the person who's conducting the train. He's only going to put a brake or going to move it. But the Brazilian state is a colonialist state. There's no post-colonialism. No, colonialism continues. This state is going to where the matrix is. The Constitution and the Bible is all the same thing. Everything that is in the Constitution is in the Bible. Everything that is in the Bible is not in the Constitution because it wasn't around. But, that's how it began. So I'm saying this because at this time, the Euro-Christian anti-colonialist society is living what they wanted, apocalypse. The world of theories is going downhill. Theories can no longer support anything. So we're going to look at the world of the paths, of the trajectories, the world of cosmology. So I am saying what my path is, what my trajectory is, anti-colonialist. It was born in Palmares. It go to Aicanilto. It go to Caldeirão. It go to Pau de Cuié. It go to Calunga. It went to Balaiadas. It went to where I am, the Riacho dos Negros. It goes to all the Quilombos and all the villages, indigenous villages. And we're going through this conference. All of the panels of which I participated from 2015 until now, and there are many, we always have indigenous people and Black people and Quilombos. And, you know, we are the ones who are now, we are in the agenda, we are on the program now. And I am pretentious. I am bold. You know, starting now, the world is Quilombola, indigenous, Candomblé, from Umbanda, from Candombero. The world is African drama. Thank you.
Passar aqui pro grande Edson.
So now I'm going to pass the floor because I wanted to add to your list, long live the favelas as well. Good morning, everyone. My name is Edson Kaya.
Nascido no estado do Amapá, no Iapoque, moro em Porto Seguro, sou homem de cabelo comprido, né, cabelo escuro, pele, o pessoal fala pele morena, eu acho, né, não sei direito, eu sou pertencente ao povo Mbengocré, né, e estou usando aqui uma roupa cinza, um tênis azul, e assim, eu queria dizer que eu sou um Mbengocré ressurgido, vou usar essa palavra inicialmente, né? Eu vivi desde os 8 anos de idade até mais ou menos 17, 18 anos, dentro de internato cristão, né? Então eu fui cristianizado, parece uma história assim do século XVI.
Until the 17, 18, I was Christianized. It looks like a story from that time. And I learned the doctrine. I learned to be a sinner, but not wanting to be a sinner because the doctrine says that we have to fight against the sin, but the sin is there. And I was very afraid of that because I was taught that so many things were a sin that in my practice and in my people lives, they were mundane things, you know, sometimes silly things like, you know, swimming on the river and play soccer, running. And it was so strict that, you know, the sins, they were all sins. You know, it was forbidden to bathe on the river, and that place was inside the Amazon forest. And after that, I became a missionary. I went to Minas Gerais state. I had never felt cold in my life. And I left to Minas Gerais, and I arrived on a cold time in the south of the state. And I was hungry for many times. And then I went to Belo Horizonte, the capital of the state. And there I studied history, and I joined the university of the state. And I'm very grateful. I cannot say that I'm not grateful to the universities, but in particular this university, the Federal University of Minas Gerais, for the fact that at the end of the first year of the course, I already identified myself as an atheist and an anarchist. And to me, that was progress. Because I was a leader of the students and a president of the students' committees, all of it in the 1990s. I participated in the first march of the landless movement in Brasilia and all the social movements. And after I finished my history course, I went back to the Amazon. And one of the first talks that I had with the chief of my tribe, I narrated the whole story, and he asked me many things, and I stopped being an atheist, and I started thinking about something else. The first thing he asked, look, from what you explained to me, I do not understand if you are an atheist or if you're Mbengocré. I think you need to choose, because our people they're not atheists. So it was the first thing that I had to rethink. And based on his talk, I started to be very close to the midwives, to the shamans, and all these people to learn and relearn things that boarding school thought was a sin and taught me was a sin. But another thing that I described to the shaman Mate, who was a victim of coronavirus recently, I talked to him about the cities, how the cities are, and I talked to him about Minas Gerais. Belo Horizonte has a river that's called, what's the name of that river from Belo Horizonte? I forgot the name. Well, it's a river that seems a bit like Tietê. Oh, Arrudas, there it is, yes. It looks like the Tietê River, and more recently they closed the river, and now it's a street. Arrudas River. There's a person from Minas here. Yesterday he went to pick me up at the airport late at night. I arrived from Lisbon. I arrived, because things seems that they're a bit rocky because of the jet lag and 10 hours of flight, that I had. But anyway, I talked to him about this Arrudas River, about São Paulo, the Tietê River, and then he asked, but are there many people in these places? I said, yes. But he asked, do they talk to each other? I was like, no, almost never, because they just pass us by very fast. They don't talk as much. And are there trees, he asked, many trees? I said, no, not many trees. There are almost no trees. You have parks. You have a few places with parks, and in the parks you have a few trees. And then he said, look, I think in those places you don't have caruana. Caruana are the spirits of the forest, those who create and recreate things, and they keep the respect among people and from people and other forms of life, the mountains, the rivers, and all that, the animals. And then he said, because the Caruanas, they live within the forests and in the rivers, and so if that's what you're saying, probably there are no longer these Caruanas. And then, so many things that I said, and I remember a text by Professor Wanderson, a great partner, professor in Rio from the Federal University of Rio, retired. He said that to us, the indigenous peoples, the school was a historical place of unlearning. There's a text called the School to Unlearn. The text is online, and it talks about this historical violence that was, and as a great measure, the school still is for indigenous people. In particular, I am a victim of that. And it's something that continues. And today we're talking about something else. We're talking about differentiated indigenous education, a school that rethinks the curriculum and brings to this school the cosmology, the different languages and traditions, the chants and dances in a dialogue with science. That's what we've been discussing since the 1970s. But listening to my great partner and brother, warrior, a bishop, Nego Bispo, I remember a few things that torment me late at night, which is to think, but is it possible indeed to have something so violent with more than 500 years of violence now all of a sudden become a partner of us, because the school now is a friend of the Quilombolas, the school is a friend of the indigenous populations, and is in favor of revolution and a project of self-determination of a people. Sometimes you have lies walking all over my head and thinking, is it, what's the trap there, And I keep thinking, because I want to talk in terms of having a convergence with my great partner and my partners here, to think, in the sense of, not of a mediation, but in the sense of convergence, really, thinking that, first of all, the indigenous population, they're decolonial by excellence, by nature. So there are people around that maybe they're even sons and daughters of colonialist people, and they're creating this theory. But indigenous people do that since the first invaders arrived. The indigenous population said in the 1500s, they say, we don't want capitalism because capitalism is a cancer that is arriving, and it's a cancer not only for us, indigenous population, but it's a cancer for humanity. And when the colonizers arrived here, they brought capitalism in their first version, which is mercantilism capitalism. There were horrible wars, and indigenous populations, indigenous villages, they were entirely exterminated in this first war. So the indigenous population, they were questioning this violent project. But I think that to continue still in this perspective of thinking of indigenous populations as decolonial by nature is also to think about this interculturality idea. Ailton Krenak presents the first episode of the series Wars of Brazil about indigenous populations. There's a moment in which he says, you know, the Portuguese, when they arrived, they were few people, and we were millions. We could have killed those guys because they arrived here tired, stinking, full of wounds and hungry, and we could have drowned all of them. We could have killed them, but we did not want to do that. You know why? Because we wanted dialogue. Historically, we have dialogue. So we thought it was possible to have this dialogue. And you know what happened? The shamans cured and healed these guys. Warriors went to the forest to look for the best fruit to serve them, to quench their thirst and hunger. And when they improved, they came violently on our people with all types of fire and guns, and with this weapon that is as dangerous, which is Christianity, and they destroyed our people. And something else, which is all apparently is contradictory, but I think it's complementary, is to think that this talk about the fact that we are living through a moment of coloniality. For me, that's hard to understand, because when I think of my brother, Galdino Pataxó, who went to Brasília to participate in a meeting to mark their territory of their people, and Galdino did not have money to sleep in a hotel, and he slept in a bus station, and he woke up at night with people burning him. This name is not coloniality. I work in an indigenous intercultural degree in the Federal Institute of Bahia, teaching there. And in going from one village to another, the car that I was intercepted by armed gunmen, and they beat me up, and they put a gun over my head, and they pulled the trigger, but the bullet would not come out because my ancestors would not allow that. And they put fire on the car, which was an institutional car from the federal government, close to the city of Boirarema, which is where we have a village from the Cacique Babau. This is not coloniality. So Ailton Krenak says that to a few people, the colonizers left. I don't even know how to say that, because that's not true. They still invade territories. They invade the territories to extract gold, and for all this extractivism, polluting water with mercury and destroying the forest and harming lives, human and non-human. Missionaries are still invading indigenous territories to impose this terror on them. So our leaders are still persecuted. Our rights are all the time violated. The leaders, men and women, they're murdered, like what happened to Masao Tupã, Kaiowá leader, who was brutally murdered inside his home by armed gunmen in Mato Grosso do Sul. Chicão Chucuru in the state of Pernambuco, the same thing. He died, murdered in an ambush. And so many other examples. The Kaiowá Guarani girls in Mato Grosso do Sul are raped and murdered. This is not the 16th century. This is the 21st century. So I can identify that maybe we need to rethink about this coloniality. You know, to us, the colonizers, the settlers are out there. And they, by excellence, are the agribusinessmen. You know, agribusiness is a category of analysis that's very recent. Bernardo Mansano, who's a great geographer and thinker, and think so much about these environmental conflicts and agrarian conflicts in Brazil, He says that agribusiness is a category that was created recently, but it's a historical situation of big parts of land and exploration of labor. And he says that the satellite-guided equipment to slave work from indigenous and African peoples of the past, you have similar marks, which is big portions of land, exploitation of land, ecocide, genocide, epistemicide, and so many violations that we see that happened in the past. So it's something that remains in the Brazilian society. And then I want to say that we are in a crisis. We're going through a very clear crisis. We cannot question that. We're living a pandemic, and our ancestors said that this capitalism thing would cause a lot of problems, a lot of disease to humanity. But nobody heard them because there's no repercussion for this speech, because they say that Indians don't know anything. After this pandemic time, in which so many people died, the UN launched several reports, scientific reports, and then people listen because, you know, they say, oh, we need to rethink about a few things because other pandemic, the worst ones can come up. Science is saying that by means of the UN. And then people then start to listen and to pay a little attention to something that indigenous people have been saying for a long time. So there's a crisis there. But COVID-19, at the tip of the iceberg, it seems to me that the capitalist way of production, it's not going to be around for so much longer because there's a crisis, there's an economic crisis of production that's very clear all over the world, not only in Brazil. There's a social environmental crisis. The earth has fever and the fever is increasing, and then people start thinking about that. In Egypt, they're gathered now in the COP27, and despite a lot of hypocrisy that they have there, the leaders and all of them, they're gathered to rethink about a few things. To think, for example, that it's not possible to continue with this model of progress that the enlightened people from Enlightenment gave us. The Enlightenment gave us this project saying that we human beings, we're smart and we're not nature. And nature is hostile. And we, with our intelligence, should master nature and transform that into good for our well-being. And so humanity has waged a war on the earth by water, the sea, and the soil. And now we have arrived at this moment with this enchantment caused by so many problems caused by this development project that seem to me that's not going to be around for a long time now. But then I'd like to talk about school. The school obviously is in crisis. If the society is in a crisis, the school is also in a crisis because the society is not in another place which is not inside the society. And then in this sense, I note, and it seems to me that it becomes more and more clear, this Eurocentric nature of the schools. The school is racist, the school is excluding, the school does not talk about other forms of knowledge. I've been a professor for a long time, since 1992. And history teachers, first of all, they have to speak of something that's outside of the real world of children, because the school does not dialogue with the reality of the youth. The school is not contextualized. But, you know, a history teacher likes to talk about the mummies of Egypt and the pyramids, and children are thinking like, what is that to me? I mean, I have nothing to do with them. I live here in a favela in Florianópolis, and what do I have to do with mummies? There's no contextualization. And then history teachers speak all the time about these things, which are from other places. And then the physics teacher talks about a lot of theories, you know, things that people don't understand. And then another one comes from geography to talk about things that are not of the real world. So there's no dialogue. It's crazy. And at the end of the day, the school wants to synthesize their objectives in approving and failing students. There's no concern in teaching and learning, and to make them talk, much less there's an interest to bring all of these knowledges from the Quilombos, from the Candomblé houses and the indigenous communities inside the schools. So definitely those knowledges, they're out for a long time because they're not knowledge that's systematized. So there's a school that very clearly is in a crisis, and it is good for unlearning, as Professor Zebersa said. Science, on its turn, is still portraying itself as a neutral knowledge that needs to be distant from its object of study. Right, Nego Bispo? So you are an object of study of the science, the Quilombo, and my people and I, we are objects. We're not even subjects. We lose this character and we become objects of a study that says it's neutral. So science creates standards that are supposedly scientific and strict, wanting to be the only truth to announce all things. And in this dialogue, they don't allow the narratives of the Quilombos or the indigenous communities. I was talking to Nego Bispo before in the hotel, and he says that, look, history is what we make in the communities. We talk, the elders talk, children listen. But in science, there's this difference between history and memory. So these memories and narratives, they're considered a second plane thing. You need to synthesize that so that it becomes science within this historical knowledge in such a way that both school and the sciences, they exclude, especially social sciences. They have silenced our people, and they have condemned. And I want to talk about this, the indigenous peoples. They have doomed the indigenous peoples to the past. They condemned and put them in folklore world. And this is remembered in the April 19th, which is the famous Indian Day, National Indian Day. And then teachers and everyone in schools, they put the children to sing commercial songs that have nothing to do with the Indians. So you have these prejudices. And my partner of struggle, he says that Indians are a metal. So we need to teach our students about the metal Indian, and to tell them to look at the periodical table, to look at the metal, which has a name that is IN, and this metal is a chemical element. It has an atomic mass and number, and definitely we are not that. I am a Democrat talking about the Mendecocrat. And close to my people, there is a Surini people, Xicri people, Caripuna people, Garepi, Maruono, all of these people. So in Brazil, we're more than 300 different peoples with different languages, more than 270 different languages. A diversity that is not within this horrible name called Indian. So the Brazilian society and the teachers, they cannot keep reproducing these prejudices. I think prejudice is not even the word. It would be racism, really, because in this format, in which students are taught without dialogue, what happens in the end is something like that. You know, I'm going to tell you two brief stories. I left school to go to the square and buy refreshment to my wife, who was pregnant at the time, and sugarcane liquid. And in the middle of the path, there was a guy trying to convince the guy to convince the child to go back home. And he said, look, and kind of yelling at the kid. And the kid kind of was not like listening to the father. And suddenly the guy looked at me and said, look, I'm going to send the Indian on you. And then the kid left running inside his home. And you see how absurd this is. Another scene, I live in Porto Seguro. I live in Porto Seguro now. And I always like to go to the beach and to look at the sea. I sit down on a table, and all of a sudden, a very white girl sat on the chair, and he said, oh, wow, you're actual Indian. And I was like, no, I'm a Bengokre. And she was like, but you're not an Indian then? And I went to explain to her these things, and she was like, oh, wow, but you speak well. Do you study? And I said, yes, I do study. I studied history in your city, Belo Horizonte, in the Federal University of Minas Gerais. Oh, wow, you're very smart. And then we continued to talk. And all of a sudden, I told her, you know, in the middle of the conversation of my doctoral degree. And she looked at me and said, "Oh, why? Are you a doctor? So you're not an Indian. You're a doctor, so you're not an Indian." And look how these things work in the minds of people. And they learn this in school by excellence. They learn in several places within the society, but in particular, the school is a bomb, you know, to put these things in children's minds. So I wanted to say that this panel here, this place in which we are, it's a privileged space because, in fact, it is a place in which we are building thoughts. It's a plural space in terms of thoughts. Not only this space, but also the audience. You know, I see people of different places, you know, but it's a place of racism and prejudice and about these silenced voices. You know, I'm going to evoke here an European whom I kind of admire, which is Walter Benjamin. In his thesis of history, he denounces these silenced voices and about the need to bring these silenced voices to history and to make history. Because I think this is a good invitation that I'd like to give. But, you know, to say that it is necessary for us to rethink about the mono-epistemic science, the science that wants to be the only authorized voice based on this European standard. It's necessary that this plurality, that social, linguistic, and cosmological and of millenary knowledge is inside the university, inside the schools and of the social spaces, so that we can promote a movement of enchanting or re-enchanting the society and a movement of overcoming the crisis. Within the crisis of science in the universities, the crisis of the programs and the curriculum of the schools, and the economic crisis, the crisis of health, the crisis that's social, environmental, to bring these knowledges so that we can overcome all of that and we can build another society, a society in which racism, you know, is not a problem, is no longer a problem. A society in which people respect each other, but not only people respect each other, but also people need to learn to respect human and non-human lives. Indigenous people, we keep our original territory as cosmogonic spaces that produce and reproduce life. Those are sacred places that we received from our ancestors. And we take care of those gardens, not only to us, but to humanity as a whole, because we live in a moment in which there is a threat to life, human and non-human life. So I think the Brazilian society and the academia and the universities and the schools, they need to collaborate to protect indigenous people and their actions that are favorable to humanity so that we can overcome these crises. And then, you know, I wrote out so many things, but because of our time that's limited, I'd like to close by saying that it's necessary for us to attach ourselves to something that was disattached. We are part of nature, so it's man and nature. We need to attach those things together, and we cannot deal with what is surrounding us as if it were inferior. We need to treat people well, and we need to treat the earth well as a whole. This is essential, and school, education, science, university, they all need to come up with this dialogue and to put all of that into the curriculum.
And another question that I think is key is the historical memories of these groups that are silent. In a sense, it's fundamental to have people like Bispo, my partner who's here, and so many people who can have this dialogue. Because, for example, I'm 50-something, and I'm from a generation that people used to call me to invite me to a round table with indigenous anthropologists. So they invited us to speak first. And after we spoke, the indigenous took the microphone to explain what we had said. See how absurd that is. So the message is very clear. Bispo said, I want to reference him again. It's very important that now we have a protagonism project. The human progress project, it has failed so much that now we have this moment. It's a very promising moment. It's a moment for people to think about these talks, these dialogues, and these cosmological practices to protect environments, social, environmental, and human and non-human life. And this, in this sense, this traditional communities, Quilombo, in indigenous villages, and other groups like LGBT, we have the disposition and the potential to contribute to all the reconstruction of all that was destructed in the name of progress. And professors have to be very attentive to these dialogues and help incite these dialogues with the protagonism of these groups so that we can actually make the revolution and the epistemic disobedience in its actual format. It can be theoretical, just spoken. It has to actually happen. Universities and schools have to create a restructuring of their syllabuses so that this millenary knowledges can cross the curriculum, the classrooms. And to finish, I'd like to say that this mess has to come to an end that humanity is doing over our land. There's a big disrespect over life. The earth can give zero grade to us and transform humanity into cosmic powder. And to say that the ecologists who think that they'll save the planet, well, pay attention to what you really want to do, because the earth can transform humankind in cosmic powder due to the excessive mess we have made here. And in this sense, protect the originary territories of indigenous people, Quilombo territories, and other originary territories is key so that we can effectively have a promising future to us and to our kin. And not just in the present. And talking about ancestrality, our ancestors had in the past, but they are here in us. And I'm a spokesperson to them. And they're also in the future, telling us where to walk and what to say. And I'm very thankful for your attention. And let's keep the dialogue. Thank you. Okay, bravo, Edson.
Nossa, que coisa linda.
This is beautiful. It's such an honor to be here with you, sharing this moment and registering the importance of the I group, Professor Luisa, Professor Claudia, and thinking about this university, that these are groups. It's groups like Aya that make all the difference, and a dispute inside the university. It's not easy inside the university. So congratulations to Aya, long live Aya and everyone in it. Okay. Okay, there's a message. Okay. So facing all these important questions pointed here, the questions always come. Paulo Freire certainly is with us in this moment, but he would be here reminding a book that he wrote with Adriana Nogueiras. Title What to Do? Resuming a Lenin question. So before this, what to do, pointed out by the colleagues, particularly Ed, so he gave us the agenda of the work and asking, who is educating the educators? We have answers, we have to tell Max. But the challenge of unlearning to be the society against nature, the society that hates nature, just remind Sérgio Moscovici's beautiful book, Unlearn and Relearn to be a society with nature, society that understands that it cannot do without nature, because the planet, because we have to do this work in in the feminine variation. It's our mother, it's a sacred womb. The mother planet tells us the whole time that we cannot exist outside the earth. When you leave the planet, you have to put in equipment, a cybernetic equipment, you become a cyborg, you breathe another air, you put a helmet, a special clothes. You're no longer human. Our humanity is in the earth, it's here. So the words earth and humanity have to be one. Like existence. Existence doesn't exist outside the planet. We and the planet are just one life. The Kuna people knew that. They called Abiyala, living earth. Povo Kuna people in Panama who are there resisting for fighting their right to exist. That's what the indigenous people made. Quilombo, settlements, favelas. The movement, social movement has taught us to fight the right to exist. And so earth and existence, as the great name to the table, the round table of last night, earth resistance. This is about what this table is about. Earth resist. And so I now want to ask you, what do we do? How to resist in this earth and how to educate educators to resistance in the earth?
De repente, cheiro.
Out of the blue, a smell.
Cheiro de si.
A vaguing smell.
De repente,
smell of horniness. Out of nowhere, a humid smell of fecund bodies. It has rain in the hinterlands. I spoke this to my land. I live in the inside of in the dry lands of the Northeast. I know you can imagine, but those who weren't there doesn't feel when it rains there. Sometimes during a year, it only rains one time. Sometimes a little bit more, but when it rains in the Caatinga, there's that smell of procreation, and all lives are procreating. And when I get to the lands and I put the seeds in the womb of the earth, it's like sex with a real orgasm. In the most essential word of life, I am having sex with the earth. And then there's a plant, and me and the earth, we will take care of this earth. And this plant will take care of me and the earth. So this is the relationship that we have with the earth. We Quilombolas and also other people, the polytheistic people, not the monotheistic people, they have this relationship with the land. One of my masters, Mother Joana, I always mention her, she said, son, everything that rottens, you have to throw into earth. Everything that does not, you keep it. If it doesn't work to you now, you can keep it. While it doesn't work to you, you keep it stored until it works to you. But nothing is garbage to us. There's garbage in towns. There's garbage in the mono society. Mono is just one. What is not that is garbage. Joana said, who has two has one, who has one has nothing. It works for everything in life. But Mother Joana also told me, the land gives and the life and the land also wants. The land gives and the land wants. Mother Joana says, the bowl in which you give is the bowl in which you receive. If you give good things, you receive good things. If you give bad things, you receive bad things. So give always good things. Mother Joana told me, son, it's not a bad thing to ask. It can be embarrassing if you see that someone is approaching you to ask. Before that, you offer her. But it's not just for people. the other beings, animals. In our book, Colonization, Quilombos, Modes, and Significance. This book, we have a PDF free on the internet. I don't have the physical book to sell. I brought one here, but I sold it on my way. Well, I thought, well, that's a shame. This is the first time I go to Florianópolis. It's good to have it here, but it's available online. So our relationships they're nature relationships. We are off the land. It's not the land there are. It's an inversion. There are several inversions that we have to question. We are off the land. Someone questioned me yesterday, how is the regularization of the Quilombo territories? Unfortunately, it is, but it shouldn't be. Our relationship with the land is not regularization. It's relationship. The land is to us until the point we relate to it. Until the point we do not relate after this point, it is to the other people. Mother Joanna told me, son, the night is to the nocturnal people, the day is to the day people. Live always what you can during the day and stay put during the night. Don't go out in the woods during the night without needing to, because you'll interrupt the life of the night beings. Here in the city, the night of the owls can live here. The night living animals cannot live here because the people who live in day have invaded the night. We need to listen to our grandparents' generation, to listen. Because the words, the sounds, the smells, the silences, the tastes, images, they're all forms of language that create the joint cosmological communication. These languages form cosmological communication. The written form is sociological communication. Organic languages, which are many, form cosmological communication, and writing is sociological communication. Only human beings communicate through writing. No other kind of living communicates through writing, only human beings. So cosmological communications compose memories. Written communications compose archives. Archives. That's a violence. Edson told me, inside the university, history has a value, a supremacy. It thinks it's superior to memory. Well, what about our communities? Memory sees itself as superior to story. That's as simple as that. So if you get to, once a person got to a community wearing a suit and the margin of the river, there's a boat. Yeah, so how much it is to take me to the other side? The person gave the price, person entered, when got a third of the river. Yes. Can you read? And the boat driver said, no. Oh, you lost half of your life. And they got half of the river. The boat driver asked, can you swim? Well, that's it. I think that first invitation to answer has a lot to do with what Bispo brought. This fencing is fundamental. When I think about walking side to side with the social movements, it has a lot to do with that. The amount of energy that we have to get out of these fences, live inside and against, if we're able to deal with this mosaic of possibilities that nature offers us. And a lot of things to deconstruct, right? Also, because what Edson brought to his personal records is our key hints. Society is still a very dear person saw a picture. I was in a street party. I'm married to a musician. It's been 15 years. So I'm always in the parties. I'm always with musicians. I live a nightlife as well. He's a researcher, a Xangô researcher. He's a composer, so writer. He is a PhD candidate and a very nice person, very dear person. Saw a picture of mine in a street party in the Black movement, and the person asked another person, "Who are those person that Claudia was in the picture?" She didn't ask me, an intimate person, a close person. So I understood the lack of knowledge of my colleague. I was in a street party with a lot of people who had dreadlocks, artists. Everyone was Black. It seemed that the picture scared her. It seemed that, oh my gosh, she was in danger. She thought I was in danger in that picture. So these are unknown worlds. A street party in a street market, an arts and crafts market. This is a famous party, right, Pedro? We go a lot to this part, right, Diana? In Rio de Janeiro. So it seems like it's a known world. So the university where we work, me and Celso at Urca, close to Pão de Açúcar, is a hostile neighborhood. The students say that a lot. It throws you away. But that's it. Also, people who don't want to leave that code, and it's very challenging. What Edson said about the person at the beach asking and also getting scared that you're not an indigenous, you have a PhD. That's our challenge. Getting outside the fences. So that's what you have to do. Have this generosity that the originary people, the Quilombolas, people from the samba schools that have welcomed and even lost their places, lost their power over their own culture. I think that's what we have. We have no way out. Unfortunately, it's not only the so-called students in schools and universities that need support to get out of these fences of codes that are so violent and make everyone so imprisoned.
Olha só.
Look, Brazilian society and specifically professors need to leave the ethnocentric stage and now be here in our level and produce this thing that anthropology calls asymmetry, an equal talk. I have a lot of criticism to school, but I have batted school as an agency with a potential, transformative potential. For a long time in the 60s and 70s, Luiz Althusser had the talk about critical reproductivist school, a very pessimistic view. We indigenous people see school in a very pessimistic way, me particularly, but we're trying to find a way because after all, I think we cannot get to schools today in a community, buy a lot of hammers and say, okay, let's put the schools down. I mean, I think that would be good if we were able to do that. But the school is ingrained in such a way that it is part, especially because today it's a source of income. So professors, indigenous, the educators, the students eat there. So this all is positive to us, but that's not enough. There is necessary to be a transformation in the syllabus. And that's our fight. I work in a teacher training course in Porto Seguro for indigenous teachers, and we bet a lot in the possibility of change in schools. But I'm not naive to think that tomorrow the schools will be a partner and love us. I think it maybe can seem cute, but it's not. It's still, it has a Eurocentric, colonizing tone, and we have to be very careful to deal with that. Now, when it comes to professors and non-indigenous schools, I'd like to remind you first about 111 two laws from 2013 that were significant advancements in the popular movements. Sometimes I have some problems to understand that, okay, there has to be a law that says that's mandatory to teach African, Brazilian, and indigenous history in schools. How can I explain that? It's necessary a law, so diversity is not real. You need a law to say, oh, indigenous have the right to live, they have their stories, they have their languages, you have to respect it. You know, okay, it's an advancement. We have to make it happen because it's a law. And universities, they can't keep training teachers that don't talk with those African, indigenous, African, Brazilian themes. They have to make it happen. This can't be just spoken. There can be no hypocrisy. The changes have to be effective, permanent debates, and the syllabus changes have to actually happen. The municipal and state offices and the Ministry of Education have to promote teacher training, continuing education, so that the professors are qualified to work with those issues, and the material has to be rethought. We can have a book that tells about the discovery of Brazil in 100 and 1500 when everything was found out. The books cannot keep generalizing these people. They have to identify, who are they talking about? Which people? Africa, where? What is Africa after all? It's so generic to say Africa, because they just say, oh, Indians. It's not Indians. As a part of and a researcher at the indigenous topic, I think about the diversity, social linguistic diversity. My people, but then I'm the one who speaks the most fluent Portuguese, because my people doesn't speak Portuguese. Few people speak Portuguese. My people, I don't know. Maybe there's a resistance in Mbengokre people to speak Portuguese. I think they don't have a lot of disposition to have the Portuguese language as a second language. My people prefers to resist, but I went there. I went to the university, to the master's and PhD, and I tried to be that bridge, an effort to be a spokesperson to outside the indigenous communities, but also dialoguing with the communities. That had a high price for me, and it still has. For a long time, as a religious student, I lost a lot of traditions, and I'm trying to learn this today. And a dialogue with the indigenous movements and with indigenous people. Rubem Alves wrote a book that I found very important called Talks for Those Who Like to Teach. There's a PDF version of this book, and there's a chapter called about eucalyptus and jequitibás. He talks about this in the capitalistic sense, like monoculture, very, very high, very tall. They're cut and they're sent. Accelerated capitalism. And jequitibá are very high trees that live millenarily in the middle forest in my region. And the Amazon, there are a lot of jequitibá still. I hope they are still there, but they are threatened. And so after this brief talk, Rubem Alves says, there are professors who are eucalyptus and there are professors who are jequitibás. The professor eucalyptus is the one who says, yeah, I don't need to study anymore. I have graduated. I study history. I don't see anything else. I'm already educated. So he has an old paper of 15, 20 years. His wage, which is also obviously very important, but it can reduce everything to that, because the Jequitibá teacher thinks that the great problem of the story is the students. If there weren't students, the school would be great. But the Jequitibá professor, in the Rubem Alves version, is that intense life professor, will to learn, that has a lot of consciousness of what Paulo Freire said. And we are incomplete beings. There is an incompleteness, especially us professors, and we always have to look for completeness, knowing that it will never happen effectively. So that the Jequitibá professor is a professor that is also worried with the wage matters and improvement of the quality of life in school, the process of teaching and learning. He is very sensitive with previous knowledge brought by the students at the communities, favelas, suburbs inside the school. And he wants to dialogue with this knowledge, recognize all the difficulties in schools and fights to overcome them. But it's the kind of person who's always there in the resistance movement, in the resistance and an epistemic disobedience inside the school to bring traditional knowledge inside. So I think that all of us, professors, educators, we have to dress the Jequitibá professor best, because as Rubem Alves says, the Jequitibá is the tree that carries a symbiosis. Not only Jequitibá, many other plants and animals who live there. It's a big intensity, and it's this way that we have to search. And trying to wrap up, I think this would be another roundtable for this. I'd like to tell everyone that there are many websites very interesting that should be researched. There's the website of APIB, the Articulation of Indigenous People of Brazil. This website has a lot of information. APIB has created a series called Maracá, and that the current president, the fascist, he has criminalized and tried to criminalize APIB due to the Maracá series, 8 episodes talking about COVID, the history, saying that the epidemic is a history structural matter between indigenous people. A very interesting debate. This series is there in the APIB website, and also many other things. And there's a COIAB website, the Coordination of Indigenous People of Brazilian Amazon. I'll just mention it. There's the website of the Social Environment Institute. There's a great amount of publications, informations, very committed indigenous that make very serious work. And the APISU, the indigenous organization that represents the people in the south of the country. We have launched a recent book called University Indigenous Territory. I was one of the organizers alongside Cassiane, my relative here. Indigenous people talking about the challenge of being an indigenous student inside the university. There's the Maracá bookstore. It's an online bookstore where we have several works from indigenous writers. And I just want to highlight there's a movement. Inside the indigenous movement is the movement of indigenous writers, which I'm a part of. And I think all educators have to dialogue with these writings by indigenous writers, which is where we are the protagonists of our memories, histories, knowledges we write, we publish, being conscious that this indigenous knowledges are mainly spoken, and that we are having the availability to bring them into the paper and writing and share them with the Brazilian society, and also videos. There's a great amount of videos, just examples. There's a project called Videos in Villages, which is very interesting, has a great amount of videos produced by indigenous filmmakers. There's a movie called Pajerama. It's an animation, very interesting, on YouTube. There's a movie called Ex Pajé on Netflix. very interesting about the presence of missionaries in indigenous territories. I watched a movie recently by Bolognese called History of Love and Beauty. And it's available on YouTube. And just to finish, really, I think that there's no way for teachers have their arms crossed and say, I'm not going to talk about the indigenous topic because I haven't learned it. I don't know. You have to be a researcher. Professors have to be researchers. And we have to look for this material. There are a lot of available things where we live, this virtual world. Virtual is also in person. And there's a huge amount of material in social network and internet.
Bom, vamos passar para a roda de conversa, só enquanto o pessoal se aproveita para fazer perguntas, se aproximar, por favor, fazer a pergunta aqui no microfone, que a gente está gravando e transmitindo, né? Lembrando que aqui está sendo transmitido, inclusive com tradução simultânea. E lembrar, quem quiser fazer pergunta, já vai levantando o braço, tá? Beleza, já vai chegando aqui. Chega aí, companheiro. É Lucas, né? Chega aí, Lucas. Beleza. Depois o companheiro ali, depois a companheira aqui. Maravilha. Vamos fazer de 3 em 3, assim a gente vai conversando. Aí, enquanto o companheiro Lucas chega aí, o companheiro está fazendo um trabalho muito interessante sobre rap na educação e história, então recomendo, depois vocês circulando aí pelos corredores, chamem para tomar um cafezinho. E lembrar que também entre os materiais está a Biblioteca AIA, né? Com um farto material, né? E a comissão.
We also have a higher library, and we also have our Guarani brothers.
O nosso amigo como o Bessa.
And I have our friend here, Bessa and Botonese. So Lucas, very briefly, before we pass the floor, just to tell a story among the Guarani with the dear Algemiro, gathering the children.
Da universidade chegou lá.
An education of children, they got there and he said, look, can I film what you're doing? I would like to record your class and then to study as you're doing it. And then Algemiro in the leadership did that. And you can sit and talk to us. So it's a school that can teach how to listen before anything else, because this is the first step.
Bom dia.
Good morning.
Ótima mesa. Vocês são incríveis.
Great panel. You are amazing. I'm not going to talk too much. My question is very simple, but very deep. I'd like to understand how the ancestry and spirituality can be used as instruments in the fight against racism. So I'm asking this to all three of you. I'd like to understand a bit more about that. All right. You can ask, and then we can gather 3 questions, and then we can answer afterwards.
Bom dia a todos.
Good morning, everyone.
Antes de fazer uma pergunta, eu queria fazer uma resposta.
Before I ask a question, I'd like to make a remark. Here we are with indigenous population, and I'd like to strengthen my part. I am from a traditional community, and I think that our traditional community also has this part of fight and resistance of our knowledge, because we name them as traditional knowledge. And to us, it was a great pleasure for me to hear you, because we from traditional communities, we look at indigenous community as a mirror, as an example for us to follow in our fight in the midst of this syllabus that's so devastating, with so much dispute. And my question has to do with that. How can we strengthen? How can we look for alternatives to leave our knowledge stronger and more resistant in view of this dispute that is the scientific syllabus nowadays? Thank you.
Olá, queria agradecer também a todos.
Hi, I'd like to thank you all. It's amazing. I'm a professor, I'm a teacher in basic education and doctoral candidate by UFSC. I'd like to ask, because there's a movement in the academia named the Reclaim of Knowledge. And at the end of the day, it's like the academy goes to certain traditional communities, indigenous, quilombolas, and they record knowledges and they bring to the academy. I'd like to know how you see this movement. Thank you. Wonderful. Well, we have these 3 questions. The first 3 questions, we can answer them, and afterwards we can have another round. Who would like to start? You have the microphone, you can begin.
Olha só.
Look,
Essa coisa assim da ancestralidade,
this ancestry thing, spirituality, it needs to be reclaimed, it needs to be rescued, even in schools, for children and the youth to have the right to belong. Because as Ribeiro de Castro says, he's a very well-known Brazilian anthropologist. He says that in Brazil, everyone is an indigenous person, with the exception of those who aren't. Sometimes I think, but who is the exception? Maybe the exception is those who look in the mirror and they want to look at themselves as Europeans. They want to think that they are, British or Spaniards or Portuguese. They don't want to feel the sacred floor below their feet as something sacred. So I think the invitation is for children and teenagers and the community in general terms, is that they have this right to belong. And in this sense, I think that we, teachers and professors, we need to create this dialogue in schools. If people don't want to belong, at least they have to learn that they need to respect social linguistic diversities. This racist violence can no longer exist. Children, Black children, indigenous children, they can't suffer anymore. I talked about a book called University, Indigenous Territory. It's in PDF, produced by Coming with our partnership. My relative was together in this project. I'm the coordinator of the project. Several indigenous men and women, and also LGBTQI+, and they talk about all of these challenges, even about racism that they suffer in the university. This can no longer continue. And so it is up to the school and to the teachers to create this dialogue. It is up to the school management to bring to the syllabus the elements that are necessary for us to calm the hearts of these people who want to continue to be colonizers and settlers. This violent form can no longer proceed. So I think that's it about this format. And from the point of view that the colleague said, it's okay, the dialogue with the academy and with universities, they have to happen and they need to be respectful. There are researchers who never set foot on indigenous communities. And, I had a student, I got to know him in my institute, a student. He was, sorry, I know. I mean, everybody has to speak. Sorry, I cannot get into details now. But, this person, he never wanted dialogue, and he always made a speech that was extremely racist. And all of a sudden, he showed up to be a master's candidate, and I'm a professor. And when I saw that boy, I thought, he has an indigenous topic, but he showed in a very clear manner the hate which he feels toward indigenous people. So you can't do that. You can't just come out of nowhere. You need to have dialogue. You need to have an honest, frank, sincere dialogue. And don't come with this neutral science talk. And don't say that, no, there's a position. If you want to have a position on our side, come, because science needs to take a stand, needs to have a position. You can no longer remain in this discourse that we're neutral and we don't want to become close to anyone. No, you need to do that. Those who want to go to indigenous territories, you can go there, you can film, you can research, but you also have to dance our torres. You need to sing, you need to do the rituals that we do with fireplaces and the full moons. You need to participate with us. What we can't have is for people to steal knowledge and, want to be successful in your thesis, your master's, and your book selling tours without knowing that in a certain moment you are inferior. Because I think this is a great contradiction. Science always says that the traditional knowledge from indigenous populations, quilombolas, and other traditional groups, they're inferior knowledge, but these spaces are filled with researchers. And those researchers are non-Black, non-Indigenous, non-Quilombola, and they want to do things with the knowledge. So what I say is, it's not that we are against. You need to do that. Science needs to talk to us, but things have to be respectful. People need to have a political position in favor of our territories and in favor of our demands and our social projects and our self-determination. For the traditional knowledge to be strengthened, we need to be more humble and to make a movement that has a protagonist. For example, Negro Bispo, he's an authority. He's an authority talking about the things that he's talking about. To Quilombize yourself, the Quilombola territory movement. My sister here, she comes from the Black movement from the periphery of São Paulo, so she knows exactly what she's talking about. She's a protagonist of a story that has to do with her. From Rio, sorry, not São Paulo, from Rio. And I come from traditional communities, indigenous communities. And so this protagonism, this debate is very interesting. It's necessary. It's essential.
Oi, Lucas.
Hi, Lucas.
Trabalhar juntos, né?
We have to work together, to fight against racism. I think we have many possibilities. I really enjoyed when Edson talked about bilingualism in these journeys throughout Latin America, Mexico. I learned, the discussion in Mexico, the intercultural discussion talks about the right to bilingualism, to this plurality of languages. So I think that when you go and you research like you do when you research rap and you look at the periphery and you come with this knowledge, these different popular culture instruments, you bring elements to the law that Edson mentioned, which is our fight for almost 2 decades now. So I think we have many ways to fight racism. And research made by a Black man like you, a young thinker like you, is an example of the different forms of fighting against racism. So I think the effort is there in this epistemological efforts. Your research, you, as we joked around yesterday in dinner, you were just awarded by WEG. So your work is in evidence because of the weight of such investigation that you have and research for education. So I'd also like to ask for applause because Lucas won an acknowledgement for an undergraduate research. And, that's it. This process of liberation that Paulo Freire helps us think, it has to do with that. This is the movement that we need to make, so that we can bring Walter Benjamin to it to do a counter part as well, right, Professor Helena? So, to strengthen our knowledge of the traditional communities, in this dynamic of thinking with the community, you know, again, this is essential. The university needs to convince itself that it's going to ensure its legitimacy, because it's a very serious matter, you know, for institutions. So it's a fight for legitimacy. The university needs to ensure its legitimacy if it is able to understand that it needs to walk side by side with cultural and social movements. So it's a chance for the university to reinvent itself, so we can strengthen our knowledge, our traditional knowledge, our community knowledge, facing this violence of the scientific discourse, as we're able to convince the different institutions that we are the future. The traditional people, the communities, we are the future. There's no way out. So I think this project to rescue knowledges needs to have a dialogue, and it needs to be in the perspective of listening, doing a sensitive listening, so that we can find our alternatives.
Em 1917, tinha umas pessoas.
In 1917, there are a few people who think I'm a lecturer or poet, or no, I'm not. I'm an anti-colonialist. I'm a Quilombola anti-colonialist. I fight my whole life. Even when I'm sleeping, I'm fighting. I coordinated more than 15 occupations of land. And I came, it's not just talk. I need to say, and I need to do, and I need to do, and I need to say. So, to say, in 2017, I was going through a very tense life. Lots of gunmen who wanted to fight me. We were fighting people from the Cayman Islands. They wanted to take land from the Quilombo people in Piauí. And in this area, people always call me, because it's an area that I even like doing that. I like to look at the face of the embarrassed landowners. I think it's wonderful. But on account of that, a lot of gunmen persecuted me. It was a very tense situation. And I was going through Belo Horizonte, and they invited me to go to a house of candomblé. And then I went there, I watched the ceremony. It was wonderful. And then I left. The other day, they said, Ishu is inviting you to drink. And I went to drink with Ishu. We drank all night. And in the morning, I said, Ishu, I want you to talk to Petavelhas, these entities. And Ishu, I was like, why? Why are you going to talk to them? Oh, And then I went and I talked to them. I asked these people, and I asked, what is the problem? What's hanging? And the problem is that this is filled with young academic white girls, and fathers are making them very bold. And we, the old women here of Candomblé, we are just washing their bathrooms. And I said, is that the problem? And they said, yes. Okay, so answer me this. What about these white girls leave and go to the church or whatever instead of coming here to you? It's best for these white girls be here under your gaze, under your coordination. What's missing in you is to take up your post, because you are the elders. Don't send them wash the bathrooms, because they won't, but teach them. You can say, look, teach them how to wash the bathroom. It's not because you're older, I don't tell anyone to do anything. I just teach. I'm like, look, if you do not wash the bathroom, it's not because you don't know, right? Let me teach you. Oh, look how wonderful it is, right?
Aí voltei, tudo bem.
And then I said, okay, sure, right, all right. And then I asked, what now? What do you want from me? And then he said, I want you to help me be smaller and smaller. He said, you are small enough to be big. You need something else. And so what do I need? I need this. Take care of the earth and the forests, and we will take care of you. Period. This is 2017. Nothing else went wrong in my life. What wants to come wrong comes closer to me, and it does not do that. And why am I telling you all this? Because the colonialism matrix is Christianity. in the papal paper of Nicolau V said, go enslave the Black people. And he said, go enslave the indigenous people. You know how he said that? He said, we authorize the King of Portugal to invade, humiliate, subjugate, expropriate, and subjugate to perpetual slavery all of the places where the people are pagan. So he's not talking about color. He's talking about relations with divinities, with deities. It's religion, Euro-Christian, monotheist, and all of their churches, evangelical, Catholic, all of them. They give these bases for the foundation of colonialism. And what do? They implement miracles. And they subjugate spells, because a miracle is Christian and spells is pagan. So when I tell this story of Exu, it's just tell you again that I come from Belo Horizonte. And once again, I drank with Exu. And I said, Exu, there's something very curious in my path starting in 2015. I walked all over Brazil and talked in person or online with all universities, public universities in Brazil. Our book, Colonization Quilombo, is being read in all of the graduate programs with quota students. But now, Exu, I'm going to Florianópolis because the south of Brazil is the place that least talks to me. Porto Alegre, I've traveled, but Florianópolis, not even online I was here, not even online I went to Paraná. Because maybe it's all settled, because people are concerned. And then I said, what about that issue? And he said, go safe because we're going to go there first.
Sabe por quê, meu querido?
You know why, my dear? Because Norberto was with me, and he came to me and he closed the door and he held the key on his hand to be sure that I was not going to leave. And he started telling me, I did not have children, but I helped raise several children. I was never rich, but I always ate and I always gave food to people. And then he started crying. And I asked him, so what? Why are you crying? Because from what I understood, you were wonderful. You were a person who handled things, you know, you are okay in life. And he said, I'm crying because food no longer feeds my body. Medicine is not enough for disease. So my time has come. And then I asked, but are you afraid of dying? He said, no. I'm crying not because I'm going away. I'm crying because I taught you everything I knew, but I did not know everything that I wanted to teach you. And what is that? You know, the person who cries because he could not teach everything that he knew. He's not a colonialist, for sure. And then I said, very well, what else? And he said, you are the person I trust most in our community. But you have to make a commitment that you're going to teach everything that you taught, that I taught you, to everyone who needs. And while you or anyone who learned from you is teaching and moving on knowledge, our knowledge is bring it forward, I will be alive so long as you do that, even though I'm buried. But if you don't teach what I taught you, I will be buried and dead, although I'm alive. My life is in your hands. You are now responsible for my living. So this is relationship with ancestry, my dear. So I am more and more at ease because more and more Norberto Mas is alive. So ancestry is not dead. It's living. It's now. It's present. Ancestry, it's trajectory. It's path. Ancestry eats. We need to feed ancestry. And to feed ancestry, it's simple. Mother Joana used to say, Good words, a few hours. Bad hours, no hours, no time. And so with respect to university, I'm going to say it in more general terms. I only studied until 8th grade, elementary school. And people have been putting pressure on me to study in university. Since it did not work, for a while back, people started to offer me a title, a degree in doctorate or something. And recently, with third days, the Federal University of Minas Gerais gave a lot of degrees to people. Paulo, Célia, not Célia, Chacali. Célia Machacali, and several other people, a degree on notorious knowledge, they awarded them. A lot of people received those degrees, and I was there. And then people said, look, Bispo, since you came, have you not regretted it? Do you want that? No, I don't. You know why? It's simple. Someone needs to say no to these universities. I can say no to them. No university in the world has dignity. I'm saying dignity is dignified enough to say what I know and to give a stamp on my knowledge.
Okay. So another 3 questions, comments, please. Welcome. Another one. Anyone else? Come on, please. Yes, come here. I like to put this flag here. I'll start my speech asking for all these people to excuse me and my ancestrality, because without them I wouldn't be here. And why me as a Quilombo person have to go to university? Why does my knowledge, my people's knowledge, my community knowledge has to go through a university committee to be validated? Why does the knowledge of my elderly, why is it hard to be told, to be taken, to be respected inside the academia? And why do we have to go to the academia? Why do I have to go to symposiums, speeches, participations? Why do I have to participate in these moments? Because it's important to my curriculum. And because the Lattes curriculum that is registered in that platform is more important than the experience I bring, what I feel, what I speak. Because everything I say, everything I feel, everything I am, it's only going to be there because I am this. And because I need a degree, certificates to legitimate all this. All these questions, I make them in my community when people said to me, Fabiana, You have to go to university. You have to take your master's, PhD. Calm down, people. Guys, why do I have to go? Why? Why do I have to do that? All the knowledge I have, all the knowledge I bring, all the knowledge I take wherever I go is the knowledge I learned from my elderly, is the knowledge I listened since I was a child, and the religious houses when I heard the people, the elderly saying. But people started to tell me I had to go. And then to some people I said, so to be a Quilombo teacher at my Quilombo, oh no, undergraduate studies are enough. To go back with the knowledge to my people, undergraduate studies are enough. I wanted to be a teacher, to be a Quilombo teacher. And for that, an undergraduate degree was enough. And when I say that, I don't say that I'm a Quilombo teacher and I don't have to keep studying. But to read Carolina Maria de Jesus, Torturado, to read all people and the theoreticians that academy presents me, I don't need to get into the academia because I can read and do all these readings without needing to have a title of master's or PhD. For me to bring all that and to write a book, to write the stories of my Quilombo, I don't need to have a master's degree or a PhD. And I'm saying all this in one part of me. And I'm saying all this that I am in the academia. But how is that, Fabiana? You're saying all this and you're in there? Well, yes. And when I'm going to several debates with my people and there's a master's, a Quilombola master's, it's important to say that she's the first master's Quilombola master's, and then she's an academic master's, and she says, Fabiana, you say it, and it's like I were listening to Nego Bispo. Aparecidamente. Who is Nego Bispo? No, it's a Quilombola man from Piauí. You speak and I listened to him. And I said, okay, I don't know who Nego Bispo. And so I bought a book of yours. I forgot to bring it to you to sign it. I brought it there in the hotel room where you were, and I forgot to bring it here. So I bought your book to try to understand what my speech had to do with what you say. I haven't read it yet. It's brand new, but I don't have to read it because now I heard everything here. And I'm sure that everything I read is what you said here. Because when we talk through the ancestrality, we don't write differently from what our ancestors are saying inside us. Because we're talking about our ancestrality. Our writing is not separated from that. Our writing is not separated from what we are. And that's what academia does to us. And I didn't want that, and I don't want that. And so why am I in the academia? Yesterday, I visited my professor. I came with my professor. She's here. She's listening to me, and I'm not even going to look at her. But I told her, Professor, can you see it? All the speeches, especially the elderly and those who didn't have to go to academia, I will give it up. I will leave my master's. She said, Fabiana, don't do that. Fabiana, did you hear that? And also, did you hear that one that said that we have to be there to do it our way? But it's so tough. It's so cruel. It's so anguishing to be in the academia. So we that have free minds, we're free. And for us that we have never been in prison, because no one imprisons those who were born free and were born to be free. So when I tell you now that I'm in academia to talk about another part of me, I have the individual me and the collective me. And this collectivity makes me be in academia. This collectivity that has fought and fights for affirmative actions that makes me be in academia. This collectivity that has fought and fights for an intercultural education, counter-colonial, because I'm no longer using decolonial. Now I understood what counter-colonial is. And that's what makes me be here. And so, what's the worth of getting inside? And so we're inside. Okay, I'll say I'll be there. And then my other aunt, she told me, do you know Giovanna? She said, dear, you have to go exactly. Just say those things you're saying there. Go and say all this that you're saying to me, but say it there. Tell it to your teachers. Tell it inside the academia. And so I'm in the academia. My colleagues are sick of listening to me, and I'm telling my story, talking about my story. So I'm first for the collectivity, my Quilombo, because the certificate I'll get and at the end of the master's is nothing. What I'm doing there is to represent my people. I'm not Fabiana there. I'm the Quilombo. I'm not Fabiana there. I'm the Quilombola movement, and this is bigger than me. And the whole time we have to be there talking about our story, telling our story, and as incredible as it may seem, to introduce our people what Quilombo is. What is the Quilombola movement? And when I see that, I understand the importance of what my aunt says. What my aunt used to say, why I had to come. So here I am, and I understand the importance when I'm here. How many Quilombolas have been here since the first day of this meeting? And why am I here? Because I'm in academia. So it's something that makes, why does it have to be like this? So I used to ask myself when I got here, how many Quilombola people are here? I don't know, but at our literature course, I'm the first. And why it takes us so long to get here? It's not because of my thinking that we should be. Our people is not there. Quilombolas are not there. There's only one Quilombola at my course, which is me. One indigenous is here, my colleague. And why not more? I looked for them, Quilombolas, to get together, and I was told it's only you. You're the first. And I'm this part that thinks that the academia should not be this space that legitimates that our knowledge don't need to be legitimate, in that my elderly, our roots, what they say is important to me. And I'm living here. I would like really to have the answer to my existential doubt, but I'll keep having it. I'll ask you to answer. What should I do?
Eu saio.
Should I leave the academia or should I stay? You told. I agree with everything you said. It's exactly that. But how about the affirmative actions that we defend so much, that we believe so much, and the colors that we want to see in the academia? My students, my youth, the youth of the Quilombo that I say, you need to go. If I don't want to go, if I don't agree with this, so what should I do? What is the answer? I'm sure.
Eu tenho certeza que o senhor vai me dar a resposta.
I'm sure you'll give me the answer, because you have an answer to everything. So I'm sure you will have the answer to me. So that's it, people. I was the whole time without speaking, but I wouldn't leave here with this language. And also in this moment, now I'm a bit long, but I couldn't refrain from congratulating the organization. Don't know who's behind the whole organization, but I don't know who thought, but I'd like to congratulate you because since the first day here, we have seen the coloniality, counter-coloniality, and everything that we believe and defend in the round tables and all the speeches. So really, even having this paradox inside of me, even having all these doubts inside of me, I'm going to leave this event fed by an ancestor food and very satisfied by a water that we drink, especially the ancestor water. And it's like we say, the actual freedom of people is being able to tell our story. I'm in academia to say that, but I want you to answer me. Thank you.
Bom dia.
Good morning. I'm Jordani. I'm a Portuguese teacher at the Federal Institute of Rio Grande do Sul. I'm the current president of NEAB. And on behalf of NEAB, I have 2 questions. I could have 84 questions after this morning, but I'll focus on 2, which is, well, I follow Professor Genevieira's work and Professor William Corrêa de Mello in Rio de Janeiro. Professor Genevieira is a concept called event pedagogy and festive curriculum, and William works with science of affection. So my question is, I brought other 2 concepts that I made up in my mind. If we can overcome this pedagogy, men in April, women in March, and gays in June, we transform this into parties in schools. If we can overcome, which would be the strategies, in go from meter pedagogy to affection pedagogy, which is the meter pedagogy would be exams, report cards. Because I've been here for 3 days and I see 3 Black women saying they're sorry for being emotional, and I'd like to congratulate Fabiana for being emotional and not saying sorry, because the metro pedagogy makes us say sorry for natural things, and the affection pedagogy makes us able to do those things. Okay, professors, we have a question, Professor Osmane and Mestre Zica. Good afternoon, good morning. It's an immense joy. I can't believe either that I, like Fabiana, I have his book, but I also forgot it. He saw me at the hotel. He made a gesture. It was funny. He made a gesture like he was calling me, and I didn't pay attention. I went there and I sat somewhere else. I was having breakfast. He saw me. I looked at him and I was like, who is he? And I left it. And then he sat somewhere else. I was looking for a place to sit down. I saw and I sat somewhere else. And when I got here, me and my colleague were here, and I saw him, Bispo. And I said, oh my God. Oh my, I'm so ashamed. I had a picture with him. I'm from UFMG. We have a research project about poetry and ancestrality and images of ancestrality. We worked with ancestrality and indigenous people. So it's for me, it's a great opportunity. I'm very, very, very happy to see this table. I saw you too. you talked to my contemporary Antônio, so we hadn't met, I'm sorry, but everything is okay. Okay, now back to the subject. Something that has touched me very much when he talked about ancestrality and the protections. And my speech the other day here, we were so worried about how to fit Simbenos money, cinema, decoloniality, in indigenous cinema. And then we were talking, and God and the ancestors were taking, and then we crossed paths about the use of the pipe to African people and indigenous people and the ancestors. It was really something very touching in my heart as an African man, and I follow African ancestrality a lot. Well, I'm a Muslim. I was born inside the Muslim community, but all my ancestors were the traditional African religion. Even if I'm Muslim, I don't reject that. You can be convicted Muslim, but I think I'll never leave the traces of our ancestors back. I'm here in Brazil, but I believe what Bispo said. They're also behind me. They accompanied me. When I came to Brazil, to get to know Brazil, I didn't know the language. I didn't know anyone here, but I came to study. And I think they were accompanying me today and helping me as maximum as possible. And you touched me when you told me, and then you told about bullets. In 2 world wars, Africans were taken in war tanks. France took African people to put them in the front and white people behind them with rifles, and African people had to face the Nazis, and they would shoot. But most African people went back to Africa. So the shots and the tanks by the Germans, of course, some of them died. But in my opinion, weren't for the physical strength and the protection of the ancestors, they would all have died. And there would be no history, no story for them to tell us what happened. And within my research, I'm talking about this important part, what Africa did to Europe and what Europe returned to us nowadays. Why does Africa have to suffer? And why doesn't Europe suffer on behalf of Africa? So intellectual Africans who are here, colonialism, decolonialism, I think this is a key side that Africa needs to rethink their relationship with Europe, up to which point we are free from Europe, or we are free from Europe. And Africa really believes in ancestrality. We have riches, but it's being exploited by them. And while they get rich, the African continent people believe they're poor, while it's one of the most rich countries and the richest continents in the world. I believe in ancestrality, and I think that's why up to today, we are being protected by them. When the pandemic started, the whole world said that the whole Africa would die. Almost no one in Africa was vaccinated. They lived with the traditional beliefs, the traditional medicines, by roots and leaves and trees, like indigenous people do. So their medicine didn't rely on the European industrialized medicine. And nowadays, all Africans are saved. The pandemic, no one barely talks about pandemic in Africa. Europe keeps talking about pandemic and the virus and COVID. In Africa, no one talks about the COVID for a long time. So I think this force it's not new, it's very ancient, and it accompanies us, like Bispo said. So the ancestor says, we'll be here before you. And when they declared the pandemic, the ancestor said, shut up, we're here. We'll dilute this virus in the air, they'll go back to Europe, not to Africa. Thank you.
Bom dia, eu sou Mestre Sica, assim que me chamo.
Good morning, I'm Master Sica, and I still have a lot of to learn to be a master. But I learned from Nego Bispo what is it to be a master. I learned a lot from you. And briefly, I promise that I'm going to take you for a speech in Porto Alegre. I changed my hat. You were there with us. I was the president-elect of yours in Zé Macedo, Toledo, about 3 years ago, before the pandemic. So I like to reinforce, I invited you again, and then there was the pandemic, it threw us down, but I will. With your permission, obviously, I'm inviting you to have another lecture, a rich lecture of yours in Porto Alegre. And I'm very glad when you speak, and I thank you all on the table. I got here late, and a coincidence is when you drink cachaça, yesterday with Exu, now in the morning, I'm far away, I'm here, but in Porto Alegre, there is the part it's where the Orishas that strengthen me, who have initiated me. I still learn with the Babalorixá, with the House of Candomblé, and my obligation today, the place for the Orixá, dedicated to the Orixás at my house, and today I raise and freshen up, and I shake my head to Oxalá. Today is the day of Oxalá in Rio Grande do Sul, and as I'm far away, Bispo, I'm sorry not to be here to learn from you in the beginning. I went to the sea to shake my head to the Orixás and nature. So where our Orixás are, from Oceania, Iemanjá. So I thank you very much, Bispo, for having accepted to come here. I'm sure you have walked through the whole national territory to talk for us, to defend us as a very connoisseur of Quilombos. And I'm very glad, and also I know that the others are too, that there's this big guidance and the balance in the axis. This is very important because in the drum beating, the coincidences are not coincidences, a divine reality. We start with the Shu and we finish with Oxalá. And why am I saying finish? Finish live. It's not to finish live. It's not the. It's Eshu opens paths. Oxalá doesn't finish. Oxalá gives us the white. Oxalá gives us the persistence and gives us the safety. And for us, today is the day to rest. We don't rest because he tells us to walk. And we always ask that on Monday in the drum beating in Rio Grande do Sul, it starts the day of Exu. And so it's one day to each Orixá. Thank you very much for your presence. And I'm certain that you'll be brought to the stage more times. Thank you, Bispo, and the other speakers. I thank you as well. So we have Professor Breeze, Diana, another companion, then we will finish. Due to the time, we're already late. Good morning. I thank you for the opportunity. I'll try to be brief. We have a lot of people. I'll just point out 3 things. First, to congratulate the table, the members of the table, for having taught us so much today. I would like to highlight my brother, my great master, Bispo. When he said a series of things that I can't comment, but there's one element that he pointed out in the end, that is this thing about feeding the ancestors. And my speech, my conference 5 days ago was about Pan-Africanism and ancestrality. And I made sure that between African societies and other societies around the world, we have to feed to death the deceased, the ancestors, because that's what there is, that grants continuity, like he pointed out. And the second point I'd like to make to my colleague, well, I'm a colleague of Ogumaya. I don't know if you know him. I'm from the Federal University of Sergipe. He made a research, he wrote an article about Calibe Morno. It's from Maryland, yes. And since I have a member of this community, because he says that there's also an intersection with Guyana. So they talk about a bird that is in the core of the cosmology. It's Maruo, not Morno. So I'd like to know something about this connection between Guyana and he talks about Patois in the moment. It's a Criollo. So, and the last point, it's about, in a sense, he had the guts to tell us a reality about the Brazilian anthropology. I'm not excluded from that. I thought it was very opportune to talk about Brazilian anthropology, because some professionals, some anthropologists listen to the native people, but don't go beyond of what they say. I thought it was perfect. And that's what divides the anthropological community in Brazil. He probably knows. A part of the anthropologists has a very clear goal, is to work on cosmology, get close to the community, the indigenous communities. And unfortunately, this part is in a very delicate situation due to hegemony of the other group that uses communities and repeats what they say. I identify a lot with this situation that the owners of the land, the owners of Brazil, deserve to be heard with the most closeness possible. And it's not about researching in the distance, also about colonization. Oh, group X is a colonizer and the other groups. I thought it was crucial. Thank you.
Hi, good morning. Well, I only want to say that I'm here because Celso asked, and I did not want to come and ask. I'm like, no, I'm crying, you know, how can I ask? And he said, no, you have to. And okay, I was not prepared. I had not even thought about anything. But then I thought about a few things, you know, what Fabiana said brought an experience to me. And then I thought, you know, but it's not even good because you're going to put even more fire, you know, because do we kick the university or not? And, you know, it's like that. And but then I got thinking, you know, among many things, I wanted to read a text that I wrote. And I think it's sort of like an honor because, you know, her talk touched me because this difficulty is very real. I was like, I don't want to cry, but I have to cry because, you know, I have a stereotype and, you know, I have to let people down, you know, I'm a strong woman from the Black movement, you know, that's it, you know, that's going to not be like that. Everybody's watching. But anyway, I thought about reading this text. And the worst profile is the one who gives up. You can be charismatic, you can be many things, you can do a lot of things, but the one who gives up, this no one controls. He's driven by passion, coming up with sense and feeling, the crazy, wild will to touch with the heart, with the skin, with the soul, object of desire, of luxury and lust. And then sometimes it goes out, but then it can come back up and it keeps that fire. So to give way is a path. And the one who gives up does not control himself. He does not sell himself. He does not regret. He surprises. He simply feels. It's an unconscious fluid looking for others. Why are we here? Well, this is a lack of giving up living, you know, and making something of your life. Because if you're someone Black who needs to go into the university and post good pictures on Instagram, traveling all over, and I give up on all of that. I think nobody knows how to explain why, and something that has a lot to do with experience, because my life is the experience of the meetings, you know, these meetings in life made me see other things and be able to experience moments like this and to think that not everything is connected to this look of success, to this perspective of success by means of a projection and money, and something that does not think about essence and only think about consumption. What is apparent, what is lived based on this colonial perspective that, you know, you only win when you accomplish certain things. So I did not even have a question to make, but I just wanted to say, you know, and unite to this voice, because sometimes I keep thinking, you know, everything is shit now. But, you know, shit is fertilization, right? As he said, you know, and, you know, maybe we can give other meanings to things. And Fabiana said, and she said, I don't have a Quilombo to represent, but I remembered my students, you know, popular education, and they expect something from me. and they listened to me because they joined the course so that they could enter into universities. And I felt their heads with things, and they accepted this in a certain way. And I'm sure that they're going to make a different university space from what oppresses us and restricts us until today. And it's a resistance that's very big, honestly. And sometimes, I only want to drink and cry in the bar, but, that's it. I wanted to know from you, how can we become all members of Quilombos to stand this university that still does, and put up with this university that still does not understand us? Thank you.
Bom dia, Claudia.
Good morning, Claudia. Is that it?
Bispo.
Edson. Bispo, my name is Guto. I'm from Porto Alegre. I'm a master of capoeira. I am also from Candomblé house, and I'm studying. I'm a master's student in education and ethnic racial relations. And yesterday in a Vava professor, we added the A to this name of the degree, anti-racist ethnico-racial relations. And so one question to Edson, but also others can contribute. When you talk about religious space, because we know that happens a lot, and how this marks your subjectivity, because it puts into a very fragile position. And how do you deconstruct that? And that, in terms of what the Bispo said, because Christianity and Catholicism is in the root of this coloniality, and thinking about the education of these ethnical racial relations, how to change this principle that which builds us as human beings, and it gives a foundation for other relations. In this neo-Pentecostal advance in Brazil, some of them don't even want to talk about education in terms of ethnical racial relations. And also thinking about our sister opening another door in this reflection, I see a lot of intellectuals who are, saying things in their life. They post things, and in this colonial thinking that we live, it seems like these intellectual professors need to be like a monk, apart from everything and not related to anyone. Yes? A chastity, that he can not see the world. And, if we think about this sentence that I'm using, it's also an evangelical sentence, because now I am in the world and I got lost from my relationship with God and I'm living the things of the world. And it seems that if the person lives this relationship of the world, we lose our intellectual ability or our respect. So if you could talk about that, that would be wonderful. Thank you. Well, let's please try to, because of our time, we'll try to answer a comment, what was discussed here, and already close. So let's do that in order, please. I'm going to start with Hugo. Pleasure, Hugo. I wish you the best luck in your path of research and accomplishments, because I think happiness is when we do things. I think we are always going to have to believe that we need to be disobedient. I came from public school, it was 16 years, and I learned a lot of things. And I learned that the most challenging thing is adults who work in the school, because the children and the teenagers, they are the best part of this, of all of this. And the ones with emotional problems, even those students, we're able to affect them positively when we are in dialogue and respect. So I believe that we are going to have to move everything around and leave the walls of institutions and it's also, what Jordan mentioned, our strategies are disobedience. I was invited a while ago. I went to Colégio Pedro II. It's a federal school, very known school in Rio, and a student leader said, Claudia, I have a lot of problems here in this school, because when it's capoeira, everybody comes. When it's to read the capital and we want to study Marx, and nobody comes. And he was very conflicted. He was 16 years old, and I looked at him, that beautiful person, and collected word with the collective group. And I said, you need to start anyway with those who come. There's no way out. Discuss Marx. If you have 3 people, you 3 read and do partnerships and alliances. And I gave the suggestion to him for other places, and then he told me about it. So make alliances, partnerships with who wants to work with you. On Capoeira Day, everybody's going to be there, and then you launch a proposal for reading with movies, and you get the movies from Marx, and you do things with whomever wants to. We are not going to be able to take everyone, the entire school, to this Marx activity. So go with what you want and try new partnerships. I think our partnerships is like that, and that's why we need to see what the other able neighbors and everybody else is doing, because there's no going back. Because unfortunately, in our field of work, the ethos of servitude is very much present. Many educators look and ask, but do you believe in these kids? I heard this in different moments from my colleagues from public schools. Do you actually believe in these kids? Because they were very much irritated with the projects that I took there, and other people wanted to do things differently with that group and didn't. So this ethos of servitude, unfortunately, it's there. It's in the school, in the university, that which we saw in that movie from the US, Writers of Freedom. But this book, no, this book is not for these kids. And for these kids, it's those things that you need to read. No, not a book. No, these kids, Brooke, to read a book? No. So in my path, 16 years studying in public schools, I heard a lot of colleagues say, do you actually believe? Because I was working with these kids with ethics and commitment. I got to this public school 7 a.m. to teach, and the school looking at a metro station, and the school said, should I say that to people, especially to the youngest one, for them to not lose hope, not to lose hope. I left the subway. And the kids were like this, waiting for me to leave the subway. And they said, she's here. And I arrived at the school. The most evangelical girl from the most evangelical family, atop, saying, look, you're late, because I forbade my students to call me Mrs. or teacher. I said, my name is Claudia. Call me Claudia. And she said, you're late. And then when I got to the second floor, she used to say, with a skirt until here, hair in a bun. And what are we going to have today? So the communication, affection, that's it. You have a commitment with the kids and with the institution and with what you're doing. I think this was my accomplishment. I was happy with the school. When I tried to join the university, I did not look back, because my suffering was such, because I wanted to be a professor and I need to leave the school. But I didn't even look back. I suffered too much. My heart is still wounded. I loved the school. But this commitment I learned with the Black movement, with the communities, with association of dwellers, because people work with their hearts and they're committed. We face the ethics of servitude. But in the school, you have educators like that. In the university, you have students and people like that. They don't believe the kids. They don't believe the people from the working class who do not work committed with these people. Those who are committed, they make things different. And we need to walk with these people. We need to be with these people and not believe in fairy tales, because this does not exist. Thank you.
Olha só, eu queria fazer comentário.
Look, I'd like to make a comment, very brief comment about a certain anguish that our warrior presented here at first, and she came back and asked Bispo this question. Of course, he's the most authorized person to talk about that, but I'd like to talk very briefly about an experience from the indigenous movement, because I've been part of this debate for a few decades now on how to deal with schools. Schools were colonizers. They have always been so. And for indigenous schools, they were a tragedy. But after rethinking and talking about it a lot, we have come to sort of a consensus that we want the continuity of school, but in another format. If it is the school to teach in our languages, to bring to the syllabus our knowledge, our cosmologies, our forms of organization, then we do want the schools, the schools who which are committed to our society projects and self-determination projects. We want that project. But when we discuss education in other levels, in superior, higher education levels, graduate and postgraduate, we believe that's also very important. We want in our communities, we want doctors and physicians who bring academic knowledge, but who come to talk about the knowledge of the midwives, of the shamans, and the sages. And we want historians who come talk to our historical memories that are silenced, and these memories need to come into the school. And we want the education of professionals from all areas, even in graduate and postgraduate levels. As Marcos Terena, who's one of the great leaders that we have, he coined a sentence in the 1980s that says, "I can be what you are without being who I am." I think this message fits perfectly in the academic world for the PhDs and the postdocs who believe are above all that and who believe are gods from Olympus. What we can tell them is, look, we can be what you want without not being who we are. So I can say, I can say that I'm a doctor, but this did not mean anything for my belonging, because as we are walking and have been discussing this within the indigenous movement and in the indigenous communities, I'd say that I was never so okay with my life because of the research that I've been doing about our belongings, about our stories. And based on that, I've occupied a few roles, even in the indigenous movement, in the Amazon and nationally. So we have led this path. Of course, that respecting the higher source of knowledge, which is the sages. And they never went to a school. They are there, and we have the libraries, the postdocs, and all of us, from the indigenous communities. It's them, and we have learned with them. And so everything that I say that is not from the academic world, it's not an individual knowledge. It's a knowledge from a group. And I learned because I like to listen. I like to observe, For an auditorium, I like to speak a lot. And as my dad used to say, he said, when you get a microphone, you want to talk about 500 years and you never want to stop talking. But of course, we have to say things that have been with us for a long time. But when I go to the communities, I want to listen, I want to leave, and I want to be with the people who to learn how to fish pirarucu with a bow and arrow, and to go drink açaí and pick it up, the fruit from the trees, and to heal with the healers, and to use the powerful plans to strengthen our spirituality, our ancestry, so that we can be okay in the world, the world of resistance and of struggle, because I'm not naive, when we go to this world of struggle, of course, a lot of people who are going to show up and they want to kill. And for me, unfortunately, I'd say unfortunately, this has become common. It's such a common thing. I had to leave Amapá to São Paulo because I was threatened with my life, because when they had public hearings to put mining and other institutions, we went there to remove the traps from these miners. And in the end, what happened? Well, they beat us and they spanked us. And after public hearing, 3 companions and I, we were violently beaten by the police, the military police. 2 cars from the police, they stopped in the square where we were sitting down and they threatened us. And I had to leave Amapá because of that. I went to São Paulo. And so I thought, well, I'm going to use this opportunity. Since I am in São Paulo, I'm going to study and do master's and doctorate degree about this violence. And then I go back with my degree of PhD and they'll have to respect me. But I ended up deviating and I went to Porto Seguro to work there with a course to educate teachers, which is where I am today. So you have to face these things. And I've learned that it's very important to live. I don't want to die as a martyr of anything, but I confess that I've learned that death is something simple. Everybody's going to go through this experience, But I think true death is when we allow the colonizers to step on us, to step on our throats and to have their filthy boots on our throats. That is death. Because apart from that, from going to here to someplace else, this is common. Everybody's going to go through this. I'm going to go to the great villages of my predecessors and to do other things. And I've learned that I have protected myself. I have become stronger based on this understanding that I had in dialogue with the elders. And so what I'd like to say is that it is necessary for us to come up with strategies to think, are we going to join the university? What are we going to do? And what about our knowledge? How is that going to be if all of the youth join the university? And, about the going to be my homes, I don't dare, since I'm moving okay, I dare not speak much about their own cosmologies and traditions, but I'd say that indigenous people, they are very much connected to the forces, let's say, didactically from nature, and they're always very much present in us by means of arts and crafts, by means of, for example, here, this is a capran. It's made of miçanga, but this jabuti hull. This is from Megengoke people, and I tattooed all of these. The birds are sacred. The birds have a vision that we're not able to have. This overall view, and to have the strength of spirituality. Bazabi, we use this. We use feathers in our arts and crafts. We use seeds. My relative there has, the feathers. This is protection. This is strength from this sacred being that has this power of going high and have this view that we're not able to have, but there's no time to enter into details in all of these. So the Gaimpi Manuel, just like the Gaibi people and the Caripuna and Paricu and Aiwai people and other peoples, they live in the border of Brazil with the French Guiana and Suriname. Gaibi, from the talk that I had with the leaders, comes from the Caribbean. Those are people who came from Latin America and they migrated from the Caribbean region, and now they are in the current space called Oiapoque. In Amapá, they live there. And there is Garibi and many other corresponding nations from the other side of the French Guiana. The French Guiana is a French colony. The colonizers talk about liberté, égalité, fraternité, but actually it's the only country that still had a colony in the middle of the Amazon forest who speak French and who have euro as a coin, and it becomes even a currency on the Brazilian side in Oiapoque for us. It's not currency. So it's a confluence of peoples, a very big one. And those who live in Oiapoque from the start speak how to speak French and Dutch and the Frank language, which is patois. we call patois. It's a mixture of Portuguese and French and indigenous languages. So each people there have their own language, but there's a general language, which is patois, and we still have languages from the foreigners. I think it's important to say here also a parenthesis, because we Brazilians, indigenous, we cannot go easily to the French Guiana. We need to have a visa for that, because a passport alone does not ensure anything. You need to have a visa to cross to the French Guiana. The French go to Brazil and, mess around in Oiapoque. Sometimes they even try to harass indigenous women for prostitution because they believe that every woman has a potential to become a prostitute. And they do that. And they come with ear and they come and do absurd things there. This is a conversation that is a lot of work, for master and all of this and research. It's just a tip for you. And lastly, I'd like to say that, oh yeah, one more thing. There's going to be then live in the territory from the indigenous people, which is a Wassa territory. It's a territory in which you have several peoples. It's a continuous territory of a border, and Brazilian state has a lot of fear of this continuous land in the border because they believe they're afraid that these people are going to get together and become an independent nation. They say that a lot. Christianity has always been a perversity, a historical perversity among the indigenous populations, but it seems to me that the Catholic indigenous group has been reconsidering a lot of things and have tried to do policies of repair. Usually the Simi people, they are connected to the liberation policy, and they're very much more respectful. And over a few years, a horrible thing came, an evil thing came. It's something from the demon, really. Something called neo-Pentecostalism. It's, from the devil, because it comes to destructure the lives of indigenous people. It's absurd what these neo-Pentecostal people are doing to the indigenous group. So Membeko Kre becomes a pastor, and he wants to forbid these rituals within the Bengu Koke people. So it's something which is a lack of respect, that it's absurd. And I was able to get my way back, but this traveling back, to use the term that has been used by João Pacheco de Oliveira, is not an easy path. Many colleagues of mine from the childhood, they're now great authorities in Christianity, and they are doing a lot of bad things to indigenous peoples all around. So, you have the traumas. I need to report this. When I became fully Christianized and I was converted and convinced, I went through a lot of bad things during my teenage years because I was a Christian and I knew sin and what was not a sin, but I thought I was a sinner by excellence, because my ancestors, they were all saying, look, pay attention, don't do that, come here, come to us. But I thought it was the devil who was causing me problems. And I thought the devil was harassing me 24 hours a day because he knew so many, I knew so many parts of the Bible. I learned how to be someone who read that, and I read the Bible all the day, and I went to church all the day many times. But the demon, according to the Christians, they harassed me all the time, and that caused me a lot of problems. I was afraid of being alone. I was afraid of the dark. So I was able to break with these things very recently, really, today in a calmer way. But in a certain way, everything that they taught me, and in particular, how to speak, that was in favor of strengthening indigenous traditions and of people and wherever I walk. And lastly, I want to say that we, the indigenous population, we can talk. And we want to talk to break with the crises and create a society that's fair, without racism, a society that respects human life and non-human life. And we are still knocking on the doors of institutions of the state and of palaces to talk. But I want to say that our practice is, if the institutions and the palaces and the state, if they don't want dialogue, we will break the doors down, and we are going to do things as we have done so historically. Oh, Fabiana, why did you not say these things at the beginning? It's wonderful, but you already brought the answer. But let me tell you, Giovanna, Silvia, Giovanna is a beautiful, wonderful person with a Creole. As me, she was already in another generation of the grandfathers in terms of imposition in the world.
Me and Giovanna is that she's in distinctionality, mean informality. Giovanna has just got her PhD in education, and I just refused the PhD. Giovanna, when she invited me for a lecture, I'll be fast, but she invited me to speak, but entrepreneurs to a convention and self-statement. A lot of powerful people. And when I started talking about self-statement, someone said, so here's Giovanna, and Giovanna was in appointed office. I'm married, but I'm poly. I can say Giovanna is pregnant. And this is not my son, but I would like it to be. So when she has her son, I'll say, the father herself. This is self-statement. I'll state myself as a father. You can forbid me to say, but I'll say it. Everyone will look at Giovanna and we're like, what? What is happening? And today when I live here, I'll call her Fabiana. Giovanna, so it was serious. So the child was born now. That child is Fabiana. She's our wonderful daughter. But guys, that's what I wanted to say. Someone asked me at the National Museum. It was an amazing scene. If you want to watch it. Bispo, what's our role as African people in the National Museum? So there's this monster. It's slaves, colonialist sex. Now, put this sex, disinfect it, and put X that bears free lives. So that's it, Fabiana. One of our masters said, let's turn the guns of the enemies in our defenses, just not to transform our defenses into guns. Who has guns only attacks, and those who attacks has more risk of losing. So you and other young people who are being inside the university, it's as me going to the 8th grade. That time, me getting into 8th grade was the same. My community got me to 8th grade. Prepare me to translate this structured language to my people. It's the same thing your community is doing with you. Have no trauma. Go where your community tells you to go. This is fitting our trajectory. Where your elderly says, go, trust your elderly and go. Because I go to where my elderly tell me to go. So my dear master, and well, I'm in Porto Alegre. José Carlos Anjos is buying my ticket. I'll be there from March 8th. Maybe I'll tell him to be 1 or 2 days more, but it's there. My trip is there. University is paying, and it's yours. Okay, it will be like this. And this is said by Baba. Is the resuming. We have to take back all this knowledge that's here translated to us. This is the resuming. And this cannot bring any shame to us. Some people ask, Nego Bispo, you're going to have an Itaú Cultural Award. Yes, what's the problem? Let's taking back. I went there and I showed it. What are you going to do with this money? I'm going to do a silly thing. My partner, she was raised in the main house. I was at the Quilombo. She thought that the main house, she was trying to bring me. I was trying to put a spell on her. She always wanted to have a car, and I thought it was not necessary. But now, since she has some movement impairment, I'm going to get the award, and I'm going to buy a car to my partner to play with that. That for me is not useful, but it is for her. This is taken back as well. That's what we do. we take it and we use it in our favor. I won't be able to answer everyone, but I recommend you to read our book. And it is necessary for you to read the book because it tells more stories than I'm able to tell here. And since you read the book, it's PDF. The available is, I'm not going to sell it. It's online. I'll sell the other one. This one is here. And the other one I'll sell because I need to do more things. So for us to restart, let's restart with a poem. This is a poem that was born at Maré, and it says the following. We, walking through the hills, we find the balance of the prairies, swimming against the flow, find the strength of the seas. Getting in the mud, we find the firmness of the hills. Being in the faraway lands, we find the proximity of the villages. We're the beginning, the middle, and the beginning. We will always exist, smiling when we're sad, always to celebrate the coming of the joy. We are the Gira. And our trajectory moves us. Our ancestrality guides us. Thank you.
Nós dizemos não.
So we say no to all the dry lands, to all the projects of people with no land, without lacks of ties, affection, and bread. We say no to those who don't know or don't let you dream, those who teach to erase, those who serve the silent lords. We say no because we are the planted seeds by the hands and the dreams of the grandmothers. We are the beautiful words in the crossroads. Born and raised, we learn to flower, and now we're going to teach how to reap. Let's go forward in our fight. Thank you.